Hey guys, welcome to your first big week of editing. When you did your diagnostic revision, you were just kind of playing around with the concept of revision a little bit. But this is the first time that you're going from a final draft or a rough draft to a final draft. And I thought that one of the best ways to approach this might be to talk about the things that are actually in the rubric for the essay assignment. So I'm going to give you some general advice first. And then we're going to talk about the rubric. The rubric's available online for you to look at, but I also am going to go over each of the categories here and talk to you a little bit about what they mean and how you might edit for them. So let's go ahead and get started. So some general advice for editors, what to look for in a general essay edit, and you're going to be able to apply this to almost every essay that you write in the course. So we're using it this time for our first big experience going from rough to final, but in the future, you'll be able to apply it to other things as well, and I may refer you back to this lecture in the future. So editing, what am I doing? So one of the things that I like to talk to students about when you're beginning editing is that it can be a really frustrating process when you're not really sure what it's supposed to be about, right? And a lot of students come to me and say, I always thought that editing was just fixing my grammar. I thought that was what I was supposed to do. Or, as I've talked about in some previous videos, a lot of you may feel like editing is just about taking my comments and adding those comments back in. But if you're doing that, then you're not becoming an independent editor. You're not developing your own sense of what works and what doesn't. And so I wanted to talk first a little bit about what the basic things are that you're looking for when you're editing and why it's something that we do in the first place, and specifically why it isn't just about using somebody else's comments or just editing the grammar. Right? It's a lot more than that. And the number one thing that editing is about is making sure that your point is clear. When you're writing, there's a reader somewhere who's going to pick up that work and go over it and try to understand what it is that you're saying. And so you want to make sure that the reader doesn't have to work too hard in order to understand your point. I run into a lot of situations where I'll come back to a student and I'll highlight a sentence in an essay and say, I don't understand what you mean here, or this sentence isn't structured properly, or what's this word over here? And the student will shrug and say, well, you knew what I meant. You don't ever want to be in that position, right? Because you don't want to have to guess whether or not the reader knew what you meant. You want to make sure that the reader knows what you mean. And that's going to fold into almost every aspect of editing that we run into as we go through the course. So making sure that your paper makes sense to the person who's reading it. And following that is organization. So I'm going to ask you to go back and look at your essay and make sure you follow the kind of organization that we've learned. Do you have an introduction that has a clear thesis? Do you have clear body paragraphs that have topics that are easily represented and that are supported by the information that you've included in those body paragraphs? And do you have a conclusion? So do you have all the parts? Go back and make sure you have all the parts. And the reason for that is that all those parts contribute to clarity. So those are all important parts in contributing to the clarity of the essay. Your content. We're going to talk a lot about content in a minute, but essentially it means, do you have good examples and good details? Have I written something that's interesting to read? And also, have I written something that 287 people haven't already said? Am I talking about something in a way that is unique? Even if I'm not the first person to say it, do I add something to the discussion? So do I have good, worthwhile content? Readers are not going to stop and read something that tells them that water is wet. They know that already. If you tell them stuff they already know, they're going to get really bored really fast. So do you have content that's interesting and worth reading? And then my voice. Do I present the topic in a way that is unique and interesting? So if you're really dry and boring, people are going to stop reading. So have you given them something to hold on to, something that piques their interest? And we're going to talk about how to do that too. And you can see my little cartoon over here of Dumbledore It says when you begin editing your first draft, dark and difficult times lie ahead, because I know that this is how students feel about editing a lot of times. Like, oh, I have to edit. This is the worst. And he says, soon we must all face the choice between what is right and what is easy. And that's the choice that you make when you face editing. I know that this is a silly meme, but it's true. When you edit, you can make a choice. You can make it easy on yourself, or you can do the essay right. And chances are, if you make it easy on yourself, you're going to lose some points somewhere. All right, so more about the purpose of editing. I just said that above all, your goal as an editor should be to make sure your ideas are heard and understood, and then that they're remembered. So I want you to think about the reader when you're writing, and I don't want you to think of me as the reader. I want you to think of a general reader. So whatever topic you've chosen, what kind of person might you be trying to express this type of topic to? And do you think that you would come across clearly to that particular person or that particular group of people? Don't just think of me as your reader, because when you're writing in the real world, you're not writing for teachers. You're writing for your bosses. You're writing for your coworkers, you're writing for your family, you're writing for people that you're trying to form connections with for some reason, and you're always writing for a purpose. And so I want you to start to think about that as you write these essays. And I know it's hard to do that because you're so used to just writing for a grade. But really think about, if I were a reader, how would I respond to this particular essay? Would I be bored? Would I be interested? And why? So you want to make sure that you're heard. You guys, your words have power. Your words have power if you can make sure that people hear you. We are living in an age when more and more people are literate. More and more people can read and write than ever before across the globe. And that's a big deal. If you guys have ever taken English 203, which is African American Lit, or if you're planning to take that, one of the big things that you're going to learn about is the way that reading and writing was withheld from people in order to try to control them. Right? If you couldn't read and write, then you didn't have access to ideas and to communication, and that took away power. Reading and writing is power. And if you can write well, you can make sure somebody hears you and pays attention to what you say. And that's really important to me. I want you guys to come out of this class understanding that writing isn't just something you have to pass as a class for a grade. It's something that's about making sure people hear you and respect you and take you seriously. And yeah, it can be really frustrating. I still get frustrated when I write sometimes. I'm trying to get some point across and I can't make it sound the way I want it to, and I can't quite get people to hear me, and it's the most frustrating feeling. But as an editor, I want you to remember that when you're editing your paper, you aren't just doing it for a grade. You're doing it to try to learn how to make sure that people hear you and understand you, because you want to be empowered. You want to know that your ideas are getting across, and also that people are remembering what you say. So if you're writing an essay with a goal in mind, with a purpose in mind, like if you're a social work major and you go into a social work class and you want to write about something that you want to see changed in the system, like if you see children being handled a certain way in the child protective system, and you want to change the way that they're handled, that's an important idea. That's a big freaking deal. And if you want to make those changes, you want to make sure that people hear you and that they remember what you're saying. And one of the ways to do that is to write well. And it's frustrating and boring, and it's not as exciting as talking out loud, but it's effective. If you can do it well, it's very, very effective. And this meme is just silly. I found that and thought it was funny, so I stuck it up there. But I, really think about, this is a serious thing. It's important, and I want you guys to be empowered with good writing. But first, let's talk about using the rubric, because I know that what you care about right now is how you're graded, and the rubric is how you're graded. I'm using the same rubric that other instructors are using in this course. We have a shared one that the whole department is using this semester, and so I'm going to be using that same rubric. So chances are, if you have friends in other 110 or 111 courses, they're being graded using the same rubric, or something very similar. And it has several different categories, and so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go over each of the categories and talk to you a little bit about what they mean and a little bit about how you can edit for them. So the first category in the rubric is purpose. Purpose connects a little bit to what I was just saying to you. It means you need to have a goal. You need to have something you want to get across to the reader, something that you want them to hear or to understand. So if you're writing a narrative, your purpose is whatever you're trying to tell the reader about yourself by telling them your story, or whatever you're trying to tell the reader about life by telling them your story. If you're writing a division and classification essay, what's your goal in breaking down this particular subject into categories? Why are you doing that? What's important about it? We read an example in the textbook where they broke down different types of online daters. And so that was like trying to give the reader advice, right? Here's what you're going to encounter. So what are you trying to do? Are you trying to make change? Are you trying to teach somebody something? What are you trying to accomplish? You need to have a purpose. And your intro is really where you set up your purpose. So when you're writing your background and your thesis, and you're telling your reader what experience you have with the particular topic that you're writing about, that's where you're setting up your purpose. But a lot of students forget, like you sort of treat it like, I told you what my purpose was up front and I don't have to talk about it again. But purpose is effective throughout the essay. All of the key points that you come up with later in the paper, those should connect back. They should all convey that purpose as well. They don't have to explicitly state them, right? I'm not saying that every time you write a paragraph you have to restate what your purpose is, but as a reader, I should be able to see when you write a new topic or a new subtopic in one of your body paragraphs, it should be clear to me how that paragraph connects back to the thing that you're trying to accomplish. And even the conclusion should be part of accomplishing the purpose of this essay. So I want to tell you guys a little story about something I encountered in an essay once, and I have told this story ever since because it's such a good example to me of purpose and how purpose works in an essay. So I had a student who was writing a narrative essay, and she was talking about, through most of the essay, she was trying to set up a description for the reader of her place within her family, because she was trying to explain, you know, there are ways that I had difficulty in college because when I was at home, I was really babied. She was the baby of the family. She was treated like a princess, and so the whole purpose of the essay was to show me when I first transitioned into college, it was hard for me to get used to being independent because I was so used to being babied. And so she's really driving this point home about, like, I was the princess of the family, everybody always gave me everything I wanted, and it was a really well done essay. And then she gets to the very last sentence. So she gets to the conclusion, and in the conclusion she says, "At least that was true until my niece was born." And then she ended the paper. And I set the paper down and I sort of looked around and I was like, I want to know what happened after her niece was born. So she had this established purpose and she had done such a good job of following through. And I had thought, yep, I see what you're saying. Like, you've had trouble making this transition because of the way you were handled in your family. And then that last sentence completely distracted me. Suddenly, I did not care anymore about her other point. All I wanted to know was about the drama that happened when her niece was born, and suddenly her niece got treated like the baby instead of her. So that's an example of how purpose has to be consistent. So as much as she might have wanted to tell me that, it didn't fit her goal, right? It distracted me as a reader from the thing that she was trying to say. So that's an example of how you can get off track with your purpose. My dog just growled at you guys. Sorry about that. You can get off track with your purpose even if you're not intending to. And I'm going to stop here and we're going to come back in our second video and we're going to get some other examples of purpose. So let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.